Hey guys, welcome to Juicy Tea, where I read out the best stories on Reddit, so you don't have to. The funny, shocking, and satisfyingly juicy. Today's story comes from the BestofRedditor Updates subreddit. I lied about who my baby daddy is. Do I tell him the truth now? Posted by Stephen Allen, 1977. This one's long, but it has some juicy updates. I, 26 female, grew up in the Midwest, but went to college in California. There I met and dated Jeff, 26 male, for our final 2 years of undergraduate. After graduation, I stayed in California to get my master's degree, while Jeff entered the workforce. We were happy together and we planned to get married after I got my master's. But after I finished my schooling, Jeff got cold feet about getting married and eventually becoming a father. He has abandonment issues from his bio dad leaving, so he broke up with me. Heartbroken feels like it would barely scratch the surface of how I felt. I had a great job in California, so I stayed in hopes that Jeff would come to his senses and we'd get back together. But we never did. He met Grace, 25 female, and started dating her about 5 months after we broke up. I started planning on moving back to my home state once I realized it was actually over. Then he and Grace broke up at the beginning of this year. Jeff and I ended up sleeping together a few times while they were broken up. It was a very public breakup, so no cheating involved. About a week after the last time we had sex, he told me that he and Grace were getting back together. He said he couldn't remain friends with me because he still had feelings for me and he had to let them fade to be fair to Grace. His final words to me were to not call him unless I was literally dying and just wanted to say goodbye. I left California behind 3 weeks later. 2 weeks after I returned home, I found out that I was pregnant. It was Jeff's. I wasn't going to be that girl that uses a pregnancy to get a man back, so I deleted all of my social media accounts and made new ones that don't have my name attached to them. The only Cali people I added were trusted friends who I either knew had no connection to Jeff or were loyal to me and wouldn't tell him my new accounts. Early in my pregnancy, I made the mistake of checking out Jeff and Grace's profiles, and I saw that they referred to each other as love of my life, and Jeff even had a picture of them captioned saying he was going to marry that girl. That broke me all over again, and since then I've blocked them both and have decided to move on with my life. I'm now 6.5 months pregnant. Since moving back, I've bought my own house in my home state and have been busy building a nursery for my baby. I already love this little baby in my belly. I feel 100% confident that I can raise and provide for him on my own, with minor help from my family. One of my best friends back in California was having an engagement party. I won't be able to attend the wedding as I'll be busy with a newborn when it happens, so I decided to fly out to see my friends and offer my congratulations to the couple before my life becomes baby-centric. I got into town on Thursday and honestly had a blast seeing all of my friends yesterday, even though it's only been about 6 months since I last saw them. They were all very respectful of my wishes to not take pictures of me below the chest. They did post pictures of me online, but from the angles it just looks like I gained some weight in my face. Nothing that would give away my pregnancy. A couple days before my flight back home, and the friend I'm staying with suggested that we go to the store because she wanted to get a scrapbook for our engaged friend. So we went to the store, and as we were getting ready to leave, I saw Jeff's cousin Tanya, 22-ish, female. I'd talked to her several times at Jeff's family gatherings over the years, but we never really got along. She was always a bit too gossipy for me to like her, so of course, she was the last person that I wanted to see. The first thing she did was loudly announce that I was pregnant, as if everyone in the store couldn't just tell by looking at me. Then she starts grilling me, asking if Jeff knows. I said no, and that he doesn't need to know as it's not his. That was a lie, obviously, but I didn't want to open that can of worms. Tanya then tells me with how big my belly is that I'm far along, and asked how I could move on so quickly. I told her that Jeff and I broke up a long time ago. She responded saying that everyone knows we were still hooking up at the beginning of this year. I did not know that that was common knowledge. I figured Jeff would have kept his mouth shut about that. Anyway, I lied to her and told her that I already had a new boyfriend and that I was 5 months pregnant. She seemed to accept that and awkwardly congratulated me. My friend and I paid for her stuff and left immediately after that. I prayed that would be the end of it. Like I said, Tanya is a gossip. So of course, she went and ran her mouth about seeing me pregnant just a few hours later. Now, a bunch of my friends have messaged me saying that Jeff is blowing up their inboxes, trying to reach me. None of them have told him my new number or social media, so he has no way of reaching me himself. My flight back home isn't for another 2 days, and I'm freaking out. Some of my friends are saying that I should just tell him the truth now that he knows I'm pregnant. I still say I can get by pretending it's someone else's, and that I'm not far enough along for it to be his. Honestly, I just want to ignore him and go back home. However, I'm having some doubts that it's not the right choice, and there isn't a clear consensus on what to do, so I'm turning to internet strangers. Too long didn't read. I got pregnant by my ex, moved away, planning to raise the child myself. His cousin saw me and told him I'm pregnant. Now he's trying to get hold of me, and I just want to go home and ignore him. Should I tell him the truth, or just go home? This guy has dad abandonment issues, and you're basically gonna make him abandon his own child? What the hell? Look, all I'm gonna say is both he and your child have the right to know one another if they choose. Don't lie to either of them. Give him a choice at least. Update. So the consensus on my post was to tell Jeff that the baby was his. Even from just a few comments, it seems that's clear. We did end up meeting up, and here's what happened. He got hold of a friend I was staying with on Instagram. I wanted to just talk to him on the phone, but he insisted we talk in person, ASAP. In retrospect, I should have just waited until the next day, but I kinda just wanted to get it over with, and it seemed like he did too. To be honest, I thought he was just gonna tell me that he wanted nothing to do with the kid, because I don't see any other reason why he wanted to talk in person right that second. Keep in mind, it was almost 10 PM at night. Why would he want to meet up just to tell you he doesn't want to be involved? So my friend and I went to his parents' house where he was waiting. His parents always treated me like family, so I guess I felt comfortable being there, even though we probably should have met at a neutral location. When I got there, Jeff's mum answered the door. She hugged me, and I could tell she wanted to touch my stomach, but she restrained herself and didn't even ask, thankfully. I always liked her. We made awkward small talk as she led me to the living room. It was clear they'd just had a party, as it was still messy with a bunch of drinking cups lying around and confetti on the floor. On the couch was Jeff and Grace holding each other's hands. I was surprised that honestly, I felt nothing for him at first. His stepdad offered me a seat, but I chose to stand. I wasn't planning on being there long anyway. Jeff started off saying that I might be able to fool Tanya, but he knows there's no way I would have ever met a new guy and gotten pregnant that fast. So he asked why I didn't tell him. I told him the truth, that the last time we spoke, he told me to not contact him unless I was literally dying, and I'm not dying. He told me that he was trying to be respectful to Grace, and obviously this would have been an exception. Grace chimed in to tell me that I ruined her proposal. I found out later, third-hand info, but knowing Tanya, I believe it, that the party at his parents' house was for him to propose to Grace in front of all their friends and family. Tanya waited until after the proposal, and when people were giving speeches, she told Jeff that she was glad he got away from me and wasn't going to be stuck raising my baby. Then all hell broke loose at the party. I had no idea that happened at the time, or I honestly wouldn't have gone to see him at all. But hearing that he proposed was when it hurt. He broke up with me because he was scared of marriage and kids, but he dated her not even half as long as we did, and she got a ring. I put on a brave face, or at least I think I did, and acted like it didn't bother me, but it absolutely did. His mum told Grace that it's not my fault, and now wasn't the time for that. Then Jeff told me that obviously I can't move now. I told him that I already did. I was only in California for the weekend. He countered that, saying that I have to move back. I told him no, I'm not doing that. He said, well, I can't just leave. At that point, I got frustrated and told him that I left months ago. My job is in my home state. I bought a house. All my doctor's appointments have been there. I established residency there a long time ago. California isn't my home anymore, and hasn't been for half a year now. So then he got frustrated and got up to approach me. asking if he's just supposed to send a paycheck once a month, and saying this wasn't how it was supposed to happen. I don't know what he meant by that second part, because he just found out I was pregnant a few hours before, but I assume he was talking about his life plans? I forced myself to calm down and try to be empathetic. I told him if he was worried about this screwing up his plans for the future, that he had nothing to worry about. I don't want or need anything from him. I've planned everything out, from finances to childcare when I return to work, to even setting up my baby's college fund. It's all taken care of already. He didn't really say anything. I don't know if he was thinking or just relieved that I had it all handled. I told him he can still get married to Grace and have his own family someday. I promised I wouldn't bother or blame him for anything. My baby will be loved and cared for. Jeff got teary-eyed and told me that I know how he feels about this. He was referring to when he broke up with me and said that he didn't want to be a dad because he didn't think he'd be a good one. He also has abandonment issues from his bio dad walking out on him, his siblings, and his mum when he was 6. I told Jeff that he's not him, his bio dad, and that he's better than him and always will be. His mum started crying at this point. I guess from seeing how his dad's abandonment still affects him to this day. I promised Jeff that I wouldn't let my baby think that Jeff was a deadbeat. I'd be honest that we just weren't meant to be together and we live thousands of miles apart. He told me that he just can't not be in his kid's life, that I don't understand what that could do to them. He asked if we could just figure something out together. I asked him what he realistically expected would be a solution, because I'm not moving back to California, and I highly doubt he and Grace wanted to pack their bags and move that far away from their friends and family. I said I'm not going to be sending my kid on a plane every few months either, because that's just too much. Jeff didn't say anything about that, so I told him maybe that could be an option when he's older and has more independence, but right now, that's not happening. Jeff's eyes lit up and he said, "It's a boy?" I'd been careful to not reveal the gender up until then, but I messed up. I nodded and he nervously asked if he could feel the baby. Before I could even respond, Grace let out this big wail and stormed off to the kitchen. Jeff apologized to me and then went to comfort her. His mum excused herself as well, as she was still crying. So she left and her husband followed her. That left me and my friend awkwardly standing there alone in the living room. All we could hear is his mum sniffling in the hallway and Grace sobbing while talking to Jeff in the kitchen. It was so incredibly uncomfortable. And I know many people will hate me for this, but I just felt so overwhelmed by the whole thing. Maybe it makes me pathetic, but having to stand in the room where a party was just held to celebrate Jeff proposing to another woman hurt so damn bad. So I left. I told my friend, "Let's get the hell out of here," and we walked quietly out. We ended up staying in a hotel, and I was able to get an earlier flight home on Sunday. Now I'm back home, and putting my focus back on the nursery. I told my friends that I'd talked to Jeff, and I apologized if he still tried to reach me through them. I advised them to block him if it's too much. I know this isn't the end of things. I'm planning on reaching out to him again eventually. Even if he did break my heart, I still care about him, and I won't deny him a relationship with his kid, if that's what he really wants. I have no idea how it's going to work. Update 2. First, I've seen a lot of comments saying that Jeff proposed to Grace within a few months after they started dating. That's not true. Aside from the 1-month breakup where Jeff and I conceived the baby, they were together roughly a year and a half before the engagement. Assuming they had no more breakups after. I don't know their full history, nor do I care to. Second, I feel like people were being a bit harsh on Jeff. I can honestly say he's not an abusive or controlling person. The man never so much as raised his voice at me in 4 years that we dated. He was a bit overbearing by demanding that I had to stay in California because that's where he is, but he just found out about the baby and was panicking that I'd disappear and he wouldn't be able to contact me. Which, to be fair, that's exactly what I did do, so I get it. I had a million thoughts, some wildly ridiculous now that I think about it now, running through my own head when I found out too. Third, he wasn't juggling Grace and I at the same time, like people think. She broke up with him. They both thought it was for good at the time. He and I started having sex again, But it wasn't like we were in a sequel of the lovey-dovey honeymoon phase. It was a weird, confusing time. We weren't talking about getting back together. I already had a start date for my new job back at home, and my move was already scheduled, although he didn't know about any of that. I was still in love with him, of course, and I hoped he'd tell me he wanted to get back together, and I would have stayed, but he didn't. Finding out that he was getting back together with Grace hurt, but I can't say I felt used for sex. I don't think either of us knew what the hell we were doing by sleeping together again. Jeff is a simple man overall. I promise he's not some supervillain taking advantage of women and playing with their emotions. I'm not making excuses for him. I wish it were that easy to say that he's a dirtbag and you should all give me your sympathy. But in reality, I know who Jeff is as a person. Anyone who reads my post just knows him as a collection of bad or questionable choices he's made. If you summarize anyone just by the bad stuff they've done, of course they come off as unlikable. Jeff's not evil or manipulative. He's just got some stuff that he probably should have worked through years ago, and admittedly, I never thought his issues were that bad until we broke up. Plus, I'm positive that Grace knew we slept together while they were broken up. There's no way that was a shock to her. He would have told her himself, and even if he hadn't somehow, if Tanya knew, then everyone else would have known shortly afterwards, guaranteed. So on to the actual update. I planned on contacting Jeff after a couple weeks. I wanted to take time to gather my own thoughts and figure out what I wanted to say. Instead, I got a phone call from his number about a week after I returned home. He left a voicemail asking me to call him so we could talk. I was honestly furious, because there's no way he should have been able to find my number. It might not seem like it's a big deal, but to me, I saw it as there being someone who betrayed my trust. I texted him asking how he got my number. He said it wasn't important and that he wanted to talk. I said it is important to me, but he still didn't want to tell me. I told him we can talk when he tells me who he got my number from. So finally, he told me who it was, and sent a screenshot of the conversation when I asked for proof. It was the second least likely friend that I'd have expected to break my trust. That's a whole other story though. So we talked over FaceTime and he told me that he absolutely wants to be in our son's life. He doesn't know how it's going to work long term, and neither do I. There's no threat of lawyers or his mum shouting grandparents' rights in the background like some people were expecting. We're adults and we'll figure this out. The situation is not any easier to handle logistically, but the emotions from that night have died down, and we have clearer heads to move forward with. He did, however, have the audacity to tell me that he hates that I didn't tell him much sooner, and that I wasn't planning to tell him at all, until Tanya found out, because he thought we meant much more to each other than that. I told him that I thought we did too, until he told me to not contact him unless I was dying. That shut him up pretty quickly, because he now knows that it was an extreme and unnecessary thing to say, even if he did want to cut contact with me. He apologised for it, and I apologised for not telling him about the baby myself. That's all we can really do. We're about to co-parent a child together, so we don't get the luxury of holding a grudge over one another. He also told me that he and Grace are no longer together. He claims it was a mutual decision, but that sounds too easy to me. How do you go from newly engaged to broken up in 18 hours with it being completely clean? I'm guessing he just wants to spare me the ugly details on what actually happened. I do feel bad for Grace. Other than incorrectly assigning me the blame for her ruined engagement party, she didn't actually do anything wrong. I don't know her personally, but I know her proposal night should have been one of the best nights of her life, and it was ruined. I wouldn't want that for any woman. And because I know what everyone's gonna say, no, I'm not seeing this as an opportunity to get back with Jeff. Honestly, all my focus is on my son right now. I'm not thinking about jumping into any relationship, much less with the man who broke my heart once already. I think Jeff and I need to figure out how we're going to co-parent first and foremost. And to be honest, I want a man who loves and chooses me for the person that I am, not because I happen to have given birth to his child. Plus, I don't know that I could ever get over that he proposed to Grace over me. Even if they broke off their engagement, I still want to know why she got a ring and I didn't. I'm going to ask eventually, but I don't think any answer will ever make it okay to me. A lot of people said that it wasn't that he didn't want marriage, that he just didn't want marriage with me. I find that hard to believe because, as I said above, we really did have an ideal relationship. Our breakup wasn't a build-up of issues. It was really as simple as, you want marriage and kids, I don't. Which I think most would agree was the most natural end of a relationship. If it really is as simple as I wasn't the one, then I want him to look me in the eyes and tell me that himself. Jeff is a terrible liar, even when he's lying for a good reason, like a special surprise. He fidgets his fingers and can't maintain eye contact when he's lying. So if he looks me in the eyes and tells me his reason for why he chose to marry her and not me, I'll know he's being honest. He's been texting me every day and calls me every night to say goodnight. Sometimes he wants to talk to the baby. It's a bit confusing for me because he broke up with me because he doesn't want a kid. But now he wants to be involved to the point where he's going out of his way to contact me and ask if I need anything. It's strange, and I don't really understand how his brain works, but like I said in my last post, I won't deny him a relationship with his kid if he wants one. Jeff wants to visit me in person to talk properly, but I told him I'm not sure that's necessary right now. He asked to come last weekend, and I said no. Then he asked again about possibly coming this weekend, but I told him I can't because I'm having my baby shower on Saturday. He wants to come. I'm not sure if that's a great idea. I'm not worried that he would say or do anything bad, and we're getting along over text. I can tell he just wants to be involved, but part of me feels like, I don't know, it's sort of like playing house almost. I guess it wouldn't be a big deal if I made it clear that he would be here as a friend and father of the baby, but not as anything more. My parents don't think it's a good idea at all, but I know it's just because they don't like Jeff ever since he broke up with me. My sister, who is a bit more level-headed, said it could be a good show of faith that I'm serious about having a healthy co-parenting relationship, and it will probably be easier to build that foundation now, before the baby comes. My brothers don't care either way, but they say they're ready to beat Jeff up if he does or says anything stupid. He won't, but I love my brothers for always looking out for me. Update. I told Jeff he could come if he agreed to 3 rules. 1. We're not together. Don't touch me, hug me, or put your hands on my stomach, unless I say it's okay. 2. I agreed that we need to have a serious talk. However, it takes place after the baby shower. And 3. You stay in a hotel. I wasn't hosting anyone. Unsurprisingly, he was fine with all those conditions and was just happy he could come. I also told him he could invite his mother if she wanted to come. He was relieved because she did mention she wanted to come. Everything was settled until the next day when he called me to ask if his brother and sister could come too. His family is really close-knit. They show up for each other in everything. I've never had any issues with anyone in his family. I've always gone along well with his parents and siblings, especially his sister, so I said it was fine. My parents hosted a dinner for Jeff's family. They don't like Jeff anymore, but they felt that since he and I are now tied together for the next 18 years, our families should be acquainted at least. When they got to the house, the greetings were as awkward as expected. Jeff leaned down to my stomach and said hi to the baby. The baby kicked, and when I told Jeff, he got all excited, so I offered to let him feel. His mum was ecstatic that the baby was kicking, saying he already knows his daddy's voice. She was so happy I didn't have the heart to tell her that the baby had been kicking for the past hour before they got there. The day of the baby shower was long, but it went perfectly. Luckily Tanya was over 2 k's away, so she couldn't ruin the event. We also did take some pictures together. As I said in my last post, I didn't want to play house with him, but honestly, I was having such a great time. I didn't even mind when both sides of the family suggested pictures. Most importantly, he asked for my consent before putting his arm around me or touching my stomach for the pictures, which was a relief because he was respecting my boundaries that I gave him before he came. The nursery is basically finished. I'd bought a different shade of blue paint because I didn't like the one I initially chose. I was planning on getting it repainted next week, but Jeff and his brother offered to do it. I said no, obviously because they were guests. My dad chimed in, saying to let Jeff do it because it was about time he stepped up to help. Obviously, my dad knows that Jeff just found out about the baby, and I reminded him of that. But my parents were the ones who had to comfort me every time I cried, when I first moved back home, and again when I found out I was pregnant. It's just going to take them a while to warm up to Jeff again. So Jeff and his brother painted the first coat with my dad, while I talked to Jeff's sister outside. I asked her about Grace, but she wouldn't tell me what happened. She just told me that was a conversation between me and Jeff. She did tell me that the family had tried to talk Jeff out of proposing because it was too fast, but he insisted, so they supported him. She also said that Tanya had been banned from family events and their families aren't on good terms, as Tanya's parents don't think what she did was a big deal. Jeff and I decided to talk that night. Neither of us knew how to start, so I just asked him point blank why he changed his mind about kids. I reminded him that he broke up with me because he didn't want marriage or kids. He said that it's true that he didn't want kids and he's still afraid he'll screw her up, but the baby's here now, so he already loves him and wants to be present for him. Then I asked about Grace. I want to know why he proposed to her and not me. It's not relevant now, but I'm still human and I want to know. What was different about her? He told me that he was never scared of marriage. He meant it when we discussed plans about marriage after I was done with school. He wanted to marry me. It was just the kids part that he couldn't do. He said that he added the marriage part into his reasoning for our breakup because it felt like it was easier for me to accept. In his head, I might have been able to overlook the kids thing for a few years, but he knew if he said he didn't want marriage either, then I wouldn't stay. I don't know why he didn't just talk to me about it. Instead, he broke my heart because he thought he was setting me free. As for why he proposed to Grace, she was on the same page as him regarding kids. She didn't want them. He talked to her about getting a vasectomy and she was on board with it. He admitted that they did move too fast. She was pressuring him to propose and she wanted a big party, so the proposal wasn't a surprise event. Grace practically planned the whole thing herself. All his family tried to talk him out of it and wait a bit longer, but he was afraid that he would lose another woman and didn't want to make the same mistake twice. His words, not mine. I asked why they broke up, because I didn't believe him that it was a clean, mutual decision. He said it was mutual, but a bit messy. Apparently, he and Grace talked the next day after everything went down. She told him that I ran away and just let me go. She said she was willing to reconsider kids if he realized that he changed his mind, but she didn't want to be a stepmom to my kid. She basically gave him an ultimatum. They could either choose her or the baby, but not both. He asked for the ring back right then and there. Apparently she threw it at him, along with a few other heavier items. He says they're fully done. He tried to do the sweet talk thing, telling me that he's glad it was me and not her that got pregnant. He says that I saved him from a huge mistake in marrying her. He regrets everything and wishes he could redo the last 2 years and never break up with me. Then he asked if I could ever see us getting back together. I got frustrated at that point and I told him he can't just keep jumping back and forth between us. He tried to defend himself, and while I agree I don't think he does it with ill intent, it is what he's doing. I told him that he keeps letting his fear control him and he needs to work on that with a therapist. I'm about to raise a baby and I don't need to be raising a man too. He did agree to go to therapy to work on his issues. Whether he actually does or not, I don't know. I did make it clear that he needs to go with the understanding that it's for him and our son's benefit, not to win me back, because that's not my focus right now. Jeff told me he's planning to move back to my home state within the next month, because he wants to be here for the baby's birth. His job offers remote work, so we can do it without having to find a new job. It'd be temporary, but he doesn't know if he'll be able to leave once the baby's actually here. We'll see what happens. Too long didn't read. Jeff and his family came to my baby shower. Everything went fine. I got the answers I wanted, why he proposed to Grace, and why he changed his mind about being a dad. He's agreed to go to therapy for his issues. We're moving forward with our co-parenting plan, and he's likely going to be moving here, at least temporarily, when the baby is born. Well, I guess getting pregnant did win him back after all. Remember, I post new content every day, so subscribe for more juicy tea.